Well everyone, it's time to make my favorite video of the year, the reflective one, where I count down my personal favorite video games of the year. Out of the 3 of these videos that I've made, this one was by far the hardest because I felt like over the course of the year, nothing stood out as being the quintessential game for me. The easy number 1 never made itself clear. I've spent the last few weeks ruminating over this list and had to make a lot of tough decisions along the way. Obviously, I didn't play everything that released in 2019, but this is my personalized list. And quite frankly, if it's anything like the last 2, no one's gonna watch this video anyway to come at mean things and disagree, so it's perfect. I alluded to this a moment ago, but as I reflect on the year in gaming, it really feels like one of the more forgettable ones. Every major game felt like an extension, variation, remake, or natural conclusion to genres we've been experiencing during this generation of consoles. Now, of course, that doesn't make them bad games. In fact, some are really great. But it means that it's hard for any one game to stand out as being truly innovative, although one does come to mind. Anyway, it makes me hungry for the next generation of consoles, but not before tackling what will most likely be the best spring season the industry has ever seen. With games like Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Animal Crossing New Horizons, the Avengers game, Watch Dogs 3, The Last of Us Part 2, and many others releasing. Before we get to it though, we have to finish recapping 2019. If you want to hear extended thoughts about any of the games I'm about to list, check out the description for links to related videos. Anyway, let's get into my personal list for the best games of 2019. So I wanted to kick off the list with 3 honorable mentions. These were the games that just barely missed the list. Numbers 11, 12, and 13, if you will. The first honorable mention I have to give, and number 13 on the list if you will, goes to Watam. Watam released just a few weeks ago, and is the latest game from the mind of Keti Takahashi. And I'm sorry if I ruined that name, I probably did, but he is the creator of Katamari Damacy. And if you played that title, Watam will immediately feel familiar in its atmosphere, characters, and simple but impactful design. This is a game about fun in its purest form, and reminds its players of childhood memories like going on adventures with friends. It features light puzzle-solving elements that are never meant to frustrate you, but instead to get your creative juices flowing and your face smiling. My second honorable mention, and number 12 on the list, has to go to Days Gone. If ever there was a game that distilled every open-world game design trope into one cohesive experience, Days Gone would be it. This game was a generic amalgamation of crafting, third-person shooting, repetitive side missions, and an attempt at a meaningful story that so many other games have attempted and done better. Still, as a player, I felt compelled to finish the story and was actually pleasantly surprised to see how much content was on offer here. I fell hard into the loop of sneaking through enemy camps and melee killing everyone, which I enjoyed far more than the shooting. The game reserved its biggest mechanic for the late game, dealing with zombie hordes, which were always imposing and felt truly earned when they were defeated. Days Gone barely won me over, but a win is a win. And my last honorable mention, and the number 11 game if you will, would be Untitled Goose Game. I really wanted this game to make the top 10 list, but it was the final cut I had to make to trim the list to 10, and that was tough. This is one of those weird experiences filled with zany antics that only video games can provide. It's a title that proves the flexibility of the industry and the vast range of gameplay loops that can be crafted and eventually become beloved. Over the course of just 2 to 3 hours, you will waddle through a sleepy and peaceful village, causing the most wholesome chaos imaginable. I love how each mission's description is just the end goal, and it's up to you as a player to solve the puzzle of how to make that happen. it's mandatory to think outside the box and explore how NPCs interact with certain items. Untitled Goose Game is a miscreant's paradise for causing all sorts of mischief and mayhem as the most likable protagonist of any video game this year. And with that, we reach my top 10 games of 2019. Number 10. San Diego Studios has made a concerted effort to deliver a premium, high-quality baseball game to fans of the sport every year, and MLB The Show 19 is no different. I can't speak much towards modes like Road to the Show or Diamond Dynasty, but franchise mode has been a staple of my gaming experience this year. The game is chock full of ways to play, but taking complete control over my favorite team, the Baltimore Orioles, has been a joy. I'm in my second season rebuilding the team, and I've made quality moves to bring our squad back to relevancy, which is a great departure from the performance of their real-life counterparts. I play every game, sometimes with full attentiveness, or other times while listening to a podcast, but every walk-off win or grand slam gets me hyped. The addition of pitcher Dallas Keuchel and left fielder Chris Davis has propelled my team to stardom and in a heated competition to stay ahead of the Yankees in the AL East. Being able to control every component of the organization, from training to signing free agents to budgeting to drafting to in-game coaching decisions and controlling players, makes this the best franchise mode we've gotten yet. I can't lie, I'm dedicated as I play through every single regular season and postseason game that occurs. And let me tell you, that's a lot of baseball. Not every single game ends in drama, but when they do, it creates a lasting memory and a rush of adrenaline. Whether I'm playing in the comfort of Camden Yards or on the road against a rival, MLB The Show 19 keeps me coming back to continue molding this team how I want, and to me, it's the best sports game that released this year. Number 9. When Saber Interactive initially released World War Z, I was not super impressed, but I did get sucked into the grind for a good while. Since then, the game has consistently updated to improve itself and even given players free DLC in the form of 2 new levels and a horde mode to see how long you and a squad can survive. Moves like that are always something I appreciate, especially considering this already wasn't a full-price release at launch. Way back when I had a functioning PC, I loved the game that inspired this one, Left 4 Dead and its sequel. It's clear that this licensed game was inspired heavily from that series, but I can't complain too much as it's just nice to play a game like this again. There's something immensely satisfying about overcoming a massive horde of zombies when you're outnumbered so drastically. This game takes that feeling and cranks it to 11 by consistently flooding the map with tons of horde encounters with hundreds and hundreds of zombies coming to tear you limb from limb. These set pieces almost play out like a tower defense game and are the highlight of the title by far. The biggest problem with the game is its lack of innovation for the formula, but it provides a much needed fix of this style of game. I can't say I've rigorously continued playing this game in 2019, but it is a title I've gone back to a few times to play through again because it's mindless shoot 'em up fun on easier difficulties and a true challenge of planning and reaction time on harder difficulties. This game continues to live and breathe, and it seems more free content will come as the game continues to be supported by the developers thanks to the maintained interest from the community. World War Z started out as a pretty basic experience to me, but over the course of the year, it's a title I've really come to appreciate and respect, and it's something that lures me back in to slay zombies over and over again. Number 8. Asobo Studio created one of the most wholesome stories of the year when it delivered us A Plague Tale: Innocence back in May. The story of Amicia and Hugo de Rune was compelling, and the ragtag group of children and teenagers that accompanied you made the experience all the more worthwhile. What starts out as a very grounded story taking place in the late Middle Ages in Europe during the Black Death quickly evolves into a supernatural tale of a powerful bloodline and the power that it grants. It's absurd in the most brilliant way possible, and without spoilers, the craziness leads to a lot of great mechanics in the late game. The story is a bit cliche in structure, but by the end, the relationship between a distant brother and sister is heartfelt and pure. The game's centerpiece were the numerous encounters with hordes of rats hell-bent on stripping your flesh. The only way to repel the vermin was to stay inside well-lit areas, which deterred them away. This led to some interesting puzzle gameplay that made players plan out a strategy before jumping in blind because that meant certain death. To balance this gameplay out, Amicia also had offensive capabilities and could take out patrolling guards with well-aimed rocks shot from her sling. This combat experience starts out pretty dull, but consistently builds on itself by expanding the roster of moves available to the player. The final boss fight of this game was one of the most memorable moments for me in gaming this year because it was unlike anything else I ever experienced in a game. A Plague Tale Innocence has put Asobo Studio on my radar, and I can't wait to see what they come up with for their next outing. Number 7. If it's a Pokemon title, it's going to make its way onto my top 10 list every single year. It's just simple math, folks. One of the best decisions I made this year was to not spoil my Galar experience by watching every single trailer that Nintendo released. It made my adventure through this new Pokemon world all the better. While this generation's entry is probably the weakest we've seen so far, I can't deny the amount of personal enjoyment I've gotten out of this title. Pokemon like Roly-Poly and Sizzlipede have quickly become some of my favorite mons ever, and they paired up nicely with my favorite starter of the generation, Sobble. Many fans of this series are hoping to see it evolve sooner rather than later, and it appears Game Freak has taken some steps towards doing just that by introducing the Wild Area, a vast open space filled with lots of Pokemon to battle and catch as they roam the overworld. Perhaps they're dipping their toes in the water to see how a sub-level within an open world game may function. The other big addition to this series that this game introduced was Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, which turned out to be pretty worthwhile additions in my eyes. At first, making Pokemon bigger really didn't seem that innovative to me, but in terms of the meta, it offers a more balanced approach that blends the foundation of Mega Evolutions and Z-moves together into one package. It really makes me want to get back into the Pokemon meta for the first time in probably 4 years. While the story of Sword and Shield aren't overly fascinating, what stands out most to me is the stories I made up in my head and the fun that always comes along with exploring a new region. I particularly enjoyed the gym challenge this time around, as Game Freak took advantage of the linearity of Pokemon games by incorporating much more detail into its organization. In Galar, there's a reason we battle certain gym leaders in the order we do, and the Elite Four has been overhauled for an epic tournament-style showdown with rivals and gym leaders. There's a lot to nitpick about Sword and Shield, and it's taken its fair share of backlash since its release, but it's still a title I enjoyed my time with in 2019. Stay tuned, as I'll be posting a long-format commentary on this title in early 2020. Number 6. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but yeah, a Star Wars game published by Electronic Arts is in my top 10 games of the year. Congrats, Jedi Fallen Order, you made it. This game was a pleasant surprise and clearly took a lot of inspiration from the Metroidvania subgenre. The main plot does enough to keep your interest by introducing a lot of new characters into the Star Wars universe. The story doesn't really reach any epic moments until the very end, but it's a Star Wars narrative through and through due to the inclusion of themes like temptation, perseverance, and honor. What really stood out in this title, and the thing I appreciated most, was the attention to detail in both the aesthetics of the different planets and the level designs that form them. Every level is home to a main path you'll explore through the story, but is also filled with tons of little nooks and crannies, stuffed to the brim with secrets like hidden bosses and customization options. Exploring in this title was one of the best parts of it, and it was always rewarding to uncover new looks for my ship, our hero Cow, or BD-1. Besides that, there's a ton of Easter eggs and references to the extended universe for fans to uncover. Combat was no slouch either, as what fan of Star Wars doesn't love melee engagements with a lightsaber? It may not have been quite as fluid as I would have liked, but striking down foes with both a regular saber as well as a double-sided variation always felt remarkable, and you add in force abilities on top of that? Brilliant. The best part of combat was how various abilities interacted with each other and allowed players to pull off some pretty sick combinations. It's one of those games where if you get an idea, go ahead and try it because it'll probably work out exactly how you hoped it would. All in all, this was a great Star Wars game, and it easily claimed a spot on my list this year. Number 5. It took me a while to get my hands on Remedy's newest title, Control, but once I did, I couldn't put it down. This was one of the most engrossing and atmospheric titles I played this year, as the blend of science fiction with the bureaucracy of a government agency was such a natural fit together. It's rare that a game makes me want to read item descriptions to learn more about the game world, but in this instance, I couldn't stop myself from meticulously searching for every available piece of data to better understand the oldest house, objects of power, altered world events, and everything else. The presentations from Dr. Darling, the hotline calls with Trench, and discovering new objects of power were some of the best moments that emerged from this presentation style. All of them were absolutely gripping to me. Combat was fast-paced and chaotic, and Jesse's abilities led to some of the most badass feelings I experienced in gaming this year. I mean, what could be more satisfying than ripping up objects in the landscape and launching them towards enemies, followed by a hailstorm of bullets from the service weapon? There weren't too many other combat systems that felt this fun to engage with this year. The real highlight for me, though, was exploration and attempting to uncover all the secrets housed in this building. That was always much more interesting to me than the main story about recovering Jesse's long-lost brother, Dylan. Collecting higher and higher clearance levels meant backtracking and exploring previous locations in order to find more secrets and data points. For me, Control ended up being the most atmospheric game of the year, and one that had my eyes glued to the TV, unbothered by the outside world, and to me, that's the mark of a great game. Number 4. From Software sure knows how to create an immaculate experience, don't they? Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is the latest variation of the Souls formula, and it's safe to say they once again showed why their titles are premium, must-own games for any fans of the challenging action-adventure genre. Miyazaki and his team decided on a more focused vision in this title by ensuring that a mighty katana would be the only weapon players could wield. This allowed the team to refine combat with a triangular vision composed of strikes, deflections, and parries. Every enemy interaction could be tailored to test a player's ability to master this form of combat, and while it wasn't for everyone, it was certainly a challenge I wanted to take up. Now, I could never quite get it down packed, even after throwing myself at a tough boss over and over again, but I grasped the combat enough to beat the Sword Saint after days and days of attempts, and trust me, when I did, it was pure bliss. One of the biggest highlights of a new From Software game is, of course, exploring each new area and coming to terms with the lore of the world. Discovering the cave in the Sunken Valley that housed one of the Serpent Gods blew my mind, as it created that awesome feeling of somewhere I didn't belong, but couldn't resist going further inwards. Another one would be, and I'm sure this will be true for many players, discovering that the Guardian Ape had a second phase. The shock value made it one of the most memorable battles in the game, and the funny thing is, from a combat perspective, it's not even one of the best encounters you'll have in the game. Almost every boss is of high quality, at least in my opinion. The only thing that dragged this title down for me was that once all the content was experienced, it wasn't very replayable due to the lack of weapon choice and character builds. However, it's clear Miyazaki had a more centralized focus for this title and didn't want to design enemies and locations to accommodate for tons of potential character builds, each donning a different weapon. And it worked out, even if the title isn't as replayable as previous ones. I'm disappointed we aren't getting DLC for this game. I'd imagine we would have at least had it announced by now, so that's a bummer. Still though, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice was the best title I played over the first half of the year, and is one I can see myself revisiting in the near future. Number 3. No game this year made me want to master its mechanics more than Beenox's Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, and I would have done so too if it weren't for Nitrous Oxide's insane time trial challenges. This game, more than any other this year, kept me coming back to play it and challenging myself to get better. After completing the story mode on normal difficulty, I wanted more, so I tried my hand at hard mode and promptly got my ass smoked. At first, it seemed like the hard mode was insanely difficult, until I realized how powerful the power slide and turbo boost pads were. From here, I left my competition in the dust as I conquered hard mode and set my sights on beating Entropy's times, and eventually, all of those fell as well. I'm summing it up quickly, but this took weeks upon weeks of challenging my mind to remember the layout of every track, including shortcuts, as well as my fingers for reacting promptly and efficiently. It was the hardest I ever focused on a game this year, and beating Entropy's last challenge was pure jubilation. I could never crack into the skill needed to beat all of Nitrous Oxide's times, but it didn't stop me from trying. Since then, I've come back to the title every month to try out the new racetracks provided to us for free from Beenox in the form of their Grand Prix. Picking it up and playing it feels like a trip to Grandma's house. It's relaxing, it's comforting, and it's homely. The game looks absolutely gorgeous, and each track pops in a way that the PS1 never allowed them to. Beenox paid attention to all the details of the original title too, and it's clear they painstakingly crafted this game with love and respect to the original title and its world and its characters. I must have played through this game's adventure mode 5 times this year at least, and spent countless hours challenging other racers in multiplayer. God, I freaking love this game, you guys. Let me be honest, I wanted to make this my game of the year, but it's only held back from that because it's a remake and not an original title, and that wouldn't have felt right. Still, this easily jolted up my list of the top 10 games, and if you like kart racers, please, please play this game. Number 2. Obsidian has done it again by delivering us a fantastic player-driven RPG in The Outer Worlds. Built from the ground up, this title introduces its players to the Halcyon Colony, a distant corner of space where advances in technology have allowed mankind to start cosmic settlements. The Outer Worlds benefited heavily from being in the right place at the right time, with many players craving this kind of experience, myself certainly included. It doesn't reimagine the genre or blow your mind with anything revolutionary, but instead delivers a rock-solid player-driven RPG with lots of variety in loadouts, both statistical ones and combat-related ones. If you're a fan of this style of open-world games, The Outer Worlds is like a hot bowl of chicken noodle soup during a cold. It's just what you need, and I'm grateful that it's getting DLC in 2020, because even after 2 full playthroughs, I just want more. The thing I will remember most about my time with The Outer Worlds is just how well it was written and how much that enhanced the dialogue system. I'm someone who loves to exhaust dialogue options in games and learn as much about the history of a game world as possible if it's done right, and this title delivers on that in spades. When fighting did break out though, combat was equally as enjoyable, especially with the use of the rare science weapons found in the game. This game was universally praised at release, but lately more and more detractors have found fault with The Outer Worlds, myself included. It's not a perfect game, but for me, it doesn't take away from the fun I had while playing through it. Making a tough decision in Edgewater's geothermal plant, questing with memorable companions, and discovering the communities of Monarch stand out as some of the many highlights from my time with The Outer Worlds. When I look back on my year in gaming in 2019, only one experience could top it. Number 1. This year was so incredibly difficult to pick a game of the year, but in the end, my personal favorite experience in gaming this year was Death Stranding. While every other game on this list spent time refining, remaking, or reimagining a particular genre, Death Stranding blazed the frontier in creating a new kind of game. In a year where all the best games still felt familiar, Death Stranding gave us something innovative and original, and that's what makes it stand tallest to me. Hideo Kojima's first independent game is a slam dunk full of novel ideas and a revolutionary new form of gameplay. Starting with the story, it was gripping and filled with incredible performances from Norman Reedus, Guillermo del Toro, and others, but none more so than Mads Mikkelsen as Clifford Unger. His acting chops were put on full display, and Unger was probably my favorite character from any video game this year. The story is fresh, and the mysteries of this post-apocalyptic world unveiled slowly, which I loved. It's a world where the realms of life and death have collided, leading to extinction-level threats for the humans that still remain. America has been all but destroyed, as its lands are filled with horrifying, Lovecraftian creatures called BTs, and it's up to you and Sam Porter Bridges to reconnect the country and bring about the end of the Death Stranding. It is a compelling narrative that is purely engaging because of how interesting the concepts really are, and it kept me wanting to play to see it through to the end. But it wasn't all about the cutscenes and the story either, as the gameplay, as divisive as it was, felt polished, refined, and new to me. Calling this game a walking simulator is like calling The Witcher 3 a talking simulator. It's an insult to what's been crafted here. The term walking simulator infers that all you do is move around unimpeded by movement controls or rough terrain. Sure, walking is the basic function, but so much more goes into it as you deliver goods across the country. It's critical to plan a route for each delivery, bring all the equipment you believe to be necessary for the trek, and then go about that journey, avoiding BTs and mules along the way. I've loved how in the last few years we've gotten games that really emphasize mechanics around movement, as it's the one fundamental component that seemingly links all types of games. Every single step you take in Death Stranding matters, whether it's climbing up a ladder, crossing a bridge, going up a mountain, or crossing a river. It's about putting your best foot forward with each one. Granted, it's not for everyone, but it was something I thoroughly enjoyed and will remember for many years to come. Not that an award from me really means anything, but congrats to Kojima Productions. Death Stranding is the best game I played in 2019. Well, that wraps up another great year here on the channel. I can't wait to see what 2020 has in store. It'll start with the usual channel update video, and the first big release of the new decade will be a long format commentary on Pokemon Sword. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter at NopNapNarp, and as always, have a nice day, and take care.